Well, welcome to our final devotional on the book of Isaiah. And again, we've been going through a lot faster pace than we have through the rest of the Old Testament. Part of that now is by design, and we're going to look to kind of keep doing that over the next couple of weeks. It's going to be a lot of videos from the Bible Project, summaries of some of the minor prophets. And so hope that these are of value to you. Some of them I'd encourage you to read along and read the prophet for that day. Some of them might be a little bit more than you might have time for, but again, I encourage you to just spend time engaging in these. They're not minor because they're less important. It's just there's less content that we have from them. But Isaiah 65 and 66, themes of judgment and the new heaven and new earth. Now, a few comments I want to make. Note that in chapter 65, Isaiah talks about Israel is not all Israel. Now, there's that just because someone was a physical descendant of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and that people of covenant doesn't mean they were actually part of the covenant. What they've been invited to was covenant. They were called to share that invitation with the nations, but without being obedient to God, without their allegiance being to Yahweh, they weren't part of, as Paul would talk about later, like spiritual Israel. And I think sometimes, at least in some of our theology or in some of the way we talk about Jews today or the Jewish people back in the time of Isaiah or the Old Testament, we're a little sloppy. Just because someone was part of the political kingdom or because they were part of the family lineage of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob doesn't mean they were part of God's people, God's kingdom. And that's always been the case. It's still the case now. Just because someone was born into a Christian family doesn't mean that they're a Christian. It's part of that individual allegiance, and we become part of the community of God's people. Again, note, ritual observances don't make a difference by themselves, a theme that we've seen throughout the book of Isaiah. It's that heart that is in allegiance to Yahweh. Verse 17 of chapter 65 begins the section of new heavens and new earth, where shalom, that holistic, all-encompassing peace of Yahweh, is the reality. And that's what we're looking forward to. That's what Isaiah is prompting those who listen to his words to look forward to. But notice the earthiness of the images. The picture in Isaiah of this new heavens and new earth is not this, you're going to go to heaven for eternity, but it's that heaven, God's dwelling place, comes to earth. And that is the biblical picture. God is looking to reconnect heaven and earth, not by bringing us to heaven and the earth burning, but rather of Revelation 21:22, the new Jerusalem is coming to earth, the new heaven, and there will be a remade heaven, a remade earth. And those who enter this new heaven and new earth, chapter 66, are the humble, not those who choose their own way. That's one of the problems we saw in Judges. One of the classic line there of kind of summarizing what was going on is each did what was right in their own eyes. That's not how God calls us to live, because when we live what's right in our own eyes, we will not live in the way of Yahweh, seeking to love God and love others. And because there are those who choose their own way, judgment is coming. God is going to see through his purpose of having a people who would live with him and reflect him. And God is going to accomplish his purposes. And we will see this at the end of time. Remember that Isaiah is speaking to or about those who were, had experienced exile from the promised land. And the power to bring about the rescue was not from, politics. It wasn't from the pagan rulers. It wasn't from the Jewish people. It was God brought about this rescue. Just like God has brought about the rescue that we need from sin. It's God's power through Jesus. And those living in exile would be restored into that new Jerusalem. And then We see this imagery picked up in the book of Revelation. Remember, that book is just heavily steeped in Old Testament imagery and allusion. But here's the final thing I want to make mention of. Notice the focus in these two chapters on other nations. You know, this promise of the new heaven and new earth is not just for the people of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the Jewish nation, the old covenant people. Even in Isaiah's day, God's heart has always been for all people. He made all humanity. Every human being is made in his image to reflect him and to commune with him. And Isaiah talks about the nations, at times in negative ways. And here we see this kind of this dichotomy that the systems of how our world works apart from God, our politics or, things of that nature, even how families work, is that, it tends to focus us on our own, right? Our own family, or those who are like us, those who think like us, into these camps of us and them. We're seeing this in our nation. We're seeing this in many nations around the world today, particularly things like echo chambers, or we're all in silos where we just listen to people who think like us and talk like us or share our beliefs. And then those who don't become our enemies, or those that we need to distance ourselves from. Isaiah reminds us that God's vision is that we are to be a people that we're always seeking out the them in the us versus them of how our world works. We're to seek out those who think differently than us, who live differently than us, and invite them into God's family. Not our family, not our church, not our theology, but inviting them to follow Jesus because we are his. I hope this walking through Isaiah has blessed you. I hope the Bible Project videos bless you. And then after that, we're actually going to have some devotionals from our elders leading us over the Christmas season into the new year. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you. May the Lord be gracious to you. And today, would you know his peace? God bless.